Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in.
Welcome into another episode of the podcast, everybody. I'm excited to be here recording with you again on a beautiful May day. So today is Monday, and I just finished up a weekend of facilitating training for the organization that I got my coaching certification through, which is IPEC. And probably most of you don't know that part of my practice, or something I kind of do on the side of my practice, is I participate in trainings for students who are just like I was back in the day. And I also do mentor coaching for students going through the program. So this has become part of my business, is just being present and like a stepping stone for new students and new coaches going out into the world and everything. And it just always just lights me up to spend that time with them. And it's a lot, it's 3 days back to back, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m, really intense. And it also gives me an opportunity to be just completely in my servant heart space, which, believe it or not, is not my natural state. I'm not always like a giver and a helper and a caretaker. That's not my personality. But when I do have opportunities to do that, and I can give myself over completely to doing that, I love it. It fills me up so much. It's the same feeling that I had many moons ago when I was still a birth doula. Whenever I was at a birth, it was just like I didn't really exist. I just was totally tuned into and connected to my client who was in labor, and like everything about me as a human being on this planet just was paused. And I just was able to kind of give myself over completely to this woman who was bringing new life into the world. And it was so beautiful. It just felt really sacred. It might seem really strange to say that I have the same feeling when I help during an IPEC training, but I do, because I think it is the act of raising your consciousness and shifting your energy and evolving yourself as a human, I also think is a sacred act. And the energy of being in a supportive role of that sacred act feels the same to me. And you know what? It's the same feeling that I have when I am facilitating the retreat every fall. I love it. It's really, really fills me up. I spend the whole year planning and just putting little pieces in place and experimenting with different practices and modalities to see if I want to use them at the retreat and all of that stuff. So by the time the retreat actually happens, I've created this container where all of us, me and my guests, get to just kind of surrender to this moment that we've all come together to co-create and have prepared for and everything. So even though I'm working, so to speak, I get to have this kind of beautiful balance of once again giving myself over completely to these people that I'm in a supportive role for. But I also get to enjoy myself because I've put everything together in this way where I also am just, like I said, giving myself over to it. I get to just be in the moment, and everything about me and my needs and my wants and desires is put pause on. And so it feels super spacious and not exhausting to care for people when I'm in that energetic state. But really, the rest of the year, that's not my state. I think that one of the reasons why a lot of parents get so depleted and exhausted is because they are giving themselves over to parenthood all the time without really taking care of themselves. So when I'm parenting my kids, don't get me wrong, like I absolutely and I'm in a supportive role of them, but I am not just completely surrendering to that aspect or that energy um entirely. I take care of myself a lot, exercise a lot, I sleep a lot, I take time and be by myself a lot. I raise my kids to be self-sufficient so that they can do their own thing a lot. And I spend time with my friends a lot. I'm very limited in the things that I say yes to so that I really don't feel super busy. It's one of the funniest things is almost always when someone finds out that I have 4 kids, the first response I get is either, wow, you're a busy woman, or wow, you have your hands full. And it wasn't until recently that I used to just kind of smile and nod and almost like take it as a compliment, but it's really not true. Like I'm not very busy and I don't have my hands full. I have tons of time and space in my life, and that's on purpose. And so recently, when people say that to me, I always just say, like, I don't really feel busy, not really, and it's not just because my kids are older, because, well, first of all, I know tons of parents who have kids the same age as mine, and they are still just as busy as they always have been. It's not just because they're older. I think it's just because, once again, as you do that work of evolving yourself and raising your consciousness, and I think you start to value yourself more. And that's kind of what the retreat is about this year too, right? This theme of like nourishment. So what I want to talk about today, on the podcast is something that we're actually going to be weaving into the retreat this year. And it's something that I've been studying for a long time and I'm now starting to bring to bear more dominantly in my coaching work, which is internal family systems. So there's definitely, probably, of the listeners that are listening to this right now, there's probably half and half. People are like, yes, I love IFS. It's changed my life. Let's talk about it. And equal many people that are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I'm going to kind of just talk to you a little bit about what it is on a very sort of like high level. Um, and I encourage you to think about how this applies to you. And even if you've never, ever, ever heard of IFS before, I bet you use IFS language all the time. It happens all the time. We naturally talk about ourselves using the language of IFS, and that's not an accident. Well, first of all, IFS purposely chose to use jargon that resonates with the way that we all think of ourselves anyway, so it's not a coincidence. Um, but it's also not a coincidence in the sense that, like, this stuff that IFS teaches you, it's really not a far stretch at all to conceive that this might be the way that our psyches work and our minds evolve. So no confession this week, just a little bit sharing some anecdotes about my life, but yeah, I just kind of want to dive into, what is IFS? What are we talking about here? So um IFS, the person who originated it is named Richard Schwartz, and you can read lots of books about IFS. Like there's a good book called No Bad Parts. That's a great book. But yeah, so Richard Schwartz was just a regular traditional family therapist. And he worked with families and stuff. And when you're doing family therapy, one of the things you learn about is family systems. You understand how, like, a family is almost, it's like this ecosystem, and it has its own way of relating to it. And each of the parts, each of the members of that family are sort of playing a part in this collective organism or ecosystem that is the family. And you start to see how, mom interacts with oldest child, and that leads to dad, saying something to mom. And then, and then witnessing that impacts younger kids. And then the younger kids say something to dad. And, it's almost like a dance or a play that's being, played out. And so that's part of what family therapy involves, is really understanding the family system and understanding that to help any one individual in that family, you sort of have to help the system. And you need to understand the system. So Richard Schwartz was, understanding that. He's a therapist, and then he started working with individuals, and he would hear them talk about themselves almost like they were sort of had multiple members to themselves or multiple parts to themselves. And he started to understand or sort of notice that the way that that his patients were talking about all of these different facets of themselves, it was almost as if each facet was a member in a family system. And that's why internal family systems is called internal family systems. It's based on the idea that inside of us, we have a whole family of facets that work collectively in a system with each other. And we use this language all of the time when we talk about ourselves, even if we've never heard of IFS at all. How many times have you said, well, gosh, there's a part of me that really wants to go to the party tonight, but there's another part of me that's like, are you crazy? You're going to be exhausted tomorrow, right? I don't sound like a crazy person saying that. You've probably said something like that yourself. Well, Richard Schwartz just took all of that stuff that he was witnessing and he decided to be like, no, but actually, yeah, there is a part of you that's saying that. And there is a part of you that's responding and saying that. And by the way, none of those parts of you are self. They are all elements of your psyche or your ego that have developed over your life to help you navigate being a human in this world. They literally work to protect and help the self. So when I'm explaining it this way, most of the time people are like, oh yeah, okay, this isn't so wackadoodle. As we keep going with IFS, now we start getting into a place where it's like, oh, okay, so this is why, and maybe it seems a little bit loopy to people who don't understand it. But it is so logical and it is so profound. In fact, this weekend when I was facilitating this training for IPAC, I just happened to have a conversation with one of the students who was talking about IFS and how it had profoundly changed her life. And I can say that that's true for myself as well. And listeners to the podcast will know that I also use the Enneagram a lot in my coaching work. And one of the things you learn about the Enneagram as you dig into it is that the Enneagram is sort of like a very, very sort of living, changing, shifting experience for anyone. So your type doesn't change. But one of the things we learn in the Enneagram is that as we raise our consciousness, as we do our work, we reach higher and higher levels of integration or consciousness. We wind up being able to integrate all of these aspects of ourselves. So for example, I'm a 1. Well, there's an aspect of me that is very judgmental and thinks in black and white terms and is very rigid and likes to make rules. And these are all aspects of who I am. And they're all aspects that can be frustrating for me and also for people in relationships with me. And when I was younger, I didn't want to have those aspects to myself. Does that sound like someone you want to hang out with? Someone who's judgmental and rigid and black and white thinker and making all these rules and scolding everybody and just including themselves into trying to, do the right thing and follow the rules? Blech, boring. And so part of my work was learning all of those things about myself. And obviously my first reaction wasn't like, yay, me. I wasn't like, you're welcome, everybody. I make all these rules and then beat everyone into following them. I wished that I could change. I didn't want to be like that. But that's not actual work of raising consciousness. The Enneagram teaches us that we integrate all of those aspects of ourselves, meaning they become beautiful gifts. My ability to have this like upright, adherence to my values instead of rigid rule making is a beautiful gift. And when I am living in that high state of consciousness, that gift doesn't go away. I still have that part of myself, to use IFS lingo. It's just serving me because I'm in a healthy relationship with it. And in its serving of me, it is also serving all the people around me. And so one of the reasons why I love IFS is it's a beautiful dovetail to the Enneagram. With the Enneagram, we start to see, oh, I see this entire like scale of integration that I can be moving along, and I can increase my level of integration, my level of self-actualization, my level of consciousness. And when I do, I become this like beautiful, almost like sacred version of my type. But the Enneagram doesn't always teach us how to raise our consciousness, how to move up that level of integration, how to become more self-actualized. IFS for me and for many, many people is the way that they do that, whether they're thinking about it in terms of the Enneagram or not. But as we develop healthy relationships with these parts of ourselves, we naturally move up that scale of integration, and we become, better versions of ourselves. So that's kind of IFS in a very, very like high level nutshell. And we can go a little bit further. I'm not going to go too much further today for the podcast because it can be brain breaking. I can tell you in my study of IFS, which I've been doing for several years, you kind of learn this stuff and then you sort of just sit with it and chew on it and forget it and misunderstand it and then relearn it, just like learning anything else, right? So I'm not going to be giving you like the entire real deal on IFS in one podcast episode, but here's some sort of like foundational principles of IFS. So like I said before, IFS is based on the idea that we all have these parts. And we're supposed to be that way. We're born with our parts. It is natural for us in our being on this planet to be multiple like that. And that all of these parts that we have are sort of like sub-personalities. They're part of our collective personality. And there's those parts, like I said, since we're born with our parts, they are actually very valuable skills, gifts, resources that we have. They all have a benevolent intent and they all have gifts to share. Like when we are born earthside with all of our parts inside of us, none of them are causing problems for us at all or challenging us or hurting us in any way. They are benevolent and they all have they all have value to offer us. Through the course of our lives, experiences affect us and they affect those parts. So that sort of experiences that we have that are harmful or maybe even like, I would use the word almost unbearable to a child, for example. So something that is just above that kid's pay grade, it's intolerable for whatever reason. Those things happen naturally. Doesn't mean that your parents were bad. They may or may not have been. It doesn't mean that, something horribly catastrophically awful happened to you. It's that it felt horribly catastrophically awful just because that's what happened. And as that stuff happened, that experience forces all those parts, different parts, out of their naturally valuable state and into roles that can be damaging or hurtful to us in the end. So for example, the part that I just talked about that makes rigid rules, like I said, the benevolent, valuable part version of that part is for me is my ability to stay true and in integrity to my values. And for whatever reason, different experiences in my life, that part went from really just having that beautiful alignment with values and commitment to following my values into this sort of like rigid rule making and almost scolding energy to itself. And we can see easily how, well, having that part behave in that way could be hurtful or problematic for me. um and so we have so many parts like this, right? We have, the part that cares what everybody thinks about us, the part that wants everyone around us to be happy, the part that that feels embarrassed if we look bad, the part that thinks that there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And we can easily see how all of these little parts keep us stuck or challenge us in being able to move forward, and it can absolutely cause us pain and all of those things. um and so the work of IFS is literally about creating healthy relationships with all of these parts. It's about healing the parts that are hurt. It's about helping the parts that are in that vigilant, protective energy to relax and soften a little bit and all of that stuff. I'm not going to go into all the detail about all the different kinds of parts that we have and things like that. Like I said, today is not going to be learning every last detail about IFS all in one fell swoop, but it is going to be hopefully intriguing to you, hopefully exciting to you, and hopefully maybe even giving you a little of a maybe understanding or like aha feeling about some of the things that you're doing. And the last thing I'll say about IFS um is to speak to that idea of how do we create those healthy relationships with our parts. And this, in my opinion, is one of the elements of IFS that makes it kind of feel funny and funky when we first start doing it, because we literally talk to our parts. We feel into our parts, we can picture them in our mind, and we literally have a dialogue with them. So I, from self, can talk to that rule making part of me and say things like, what are you worried about might happen to me if you didn't make all of these rules? And, what are you helping protect me from? And what do you need so that you can relax a little bit? And how can I take care of you? And what do you need from me? These kinds of dialogues with these elements inside of us are what allow those parts to grow and change and shift, and for us to move into healthy relationship with them. And the other thing that I love about IFS is it really looks at self-growth, in my opinion, from a very healthy lens. So many of us are like how I described me maybe when I first learned about my Ania type. Like, oh, okay, so I have this rule following part of me that's like making me like a rigid stick in the mud and pissing me off all of the time. I need to fix that. I want to fix that part. I want to change that part. I actually want to get rid of that part. I don't want to be like that anymore. And there is a toxic element to some of the self-growth work that we see people doing, and myself included. I've been there and I'll probably be there again, where we feel frustration and anger with these things that we keep doing and these parts of us that make us keep doing those things. I'm mad at that rule following part. I hate that part of me. I want it to go away. Why is it ruining my life? This sucks. Everything would be great if this part just left. IFS says, no, no, no. First of all, your parts are not going anywhere. They will be with you forever. They were here when you came earthside, and they will be with you when you leave this mortal coil. So there's no way for us to get rid of them. And hating them or feeling negatively toward them or treating them with resentment, frustration, and anger only exacerbates them. For most of us, that kind of treatment was exactly what developed this parts behavior in the first place. So what we do instead is create harmony and love and kindness and compassion between us and our parts. And as we do that, those parts feel seen, they feel heard, they feel safe, and they feel like they don't need to take care of us anymore because we're taking care of them. We're the adult. The self is the only part, it's not a part. Self is the only thing, the only entity that has the maturity and ability to run our system healthily and happily. And so when all of these parts that got formed in our childhood, so they're very childish, start to realize like, oh, there's a grown-up here who loves me, who understands me, who knows exactly what to do. I don't actually need to take care of this anymore, is when we start to see real change. So it's this a sort of cosmic joke almost, that the way that that rule following part of me can soften is by me embracing it and being excited and loving toward this part of me that probably is causing problems in my life and probably is creating, friction and hardship for me. It makes sense that I want that to change. And the only way for that to change is for me to accept and love that part just as it is and create that healthy dialogue with it. So this is something that I have been bringing to my coaching when it is appropriate. And it's also something that I'm weaving into the curriculum for our retreat in October. And that makes me so excited. Everybody who comes to the retreat either already knows their type, or I work with them in advance to make sure that they do know their type. And then when we get together for the retreat, we get to use IFS to not just understand our type more fully, because, this part that I'm describing to you is a classic part that ones have, that Enneagram type ones have. But I didn't really understand it fully until I actually decided to have a dialogue with it. I understood that it was a trait that I had, but I didn't understand why. I didn't understand what it needed. I didn't understand what its benevolent purpose was. I didn't understand any of those things. And so I actually understand my type more now from doing IFS work than I did just from studying the Enneagram. Because instead of me just studying what is a type 1, let me learn that academically, I was able to study what is a type 1 when it's inside of me. What are all these parts that come along with being a type 1, and can I actually develop intimate relationships with them? And that's one of the things that we're going to be working on during the retreat. And we're going to be having delicious wine and going on beautiful hikes and laughing our butts off and having delicious food cooked for us by a chef and getting massages and all of the magical, wonderful, fun stuff about the retreat. I love a retreat because it combines all of that stuff. I always say it's like pleasure and purpose combined. And that's like for an Enneagram type 1, that's like my sweet spot. That's my happy place. And I can't wait to share it with you in October. I can't wait to talk more about IFS with you, maybe in future episodes of the podcast or in a coaching session if you choose to bring that into your life. And in the meantime, I will wait to talk to you again next week. Bye, everybody.
The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.